You are listening to Armchair Healthcare, a podcast on pills, placebos, and policy.
Welcome to Armchair Healthcare, a new healthcare podcast from Max and Matt. So what's the big news today, Max?
Well, the big news is that the joint venture between Amazon, JP Morgan, and Berkshire Hathaway has found Atul to be the CEO. And by that, I mean his name is Atul. Atul Gawande.
Just to be clear, this is for their big joint healthcare revolutionize something.
Atul Gawande, who, even though he is supposedly a world-famous physician, nobody I know really has ever heard of him.
Well, I heard about him today. And to be clear, this guy has got a few books. I mean, so he's not like... And how many Twitter followers does he have?
Way more than we do.
Way more than both of us put together.
It's like 264,000.
I have like 100. You've got a few thousand. Yeah. So this guy, people do know who he is. But
he's bigger than Adam Feuerstein.
He's bigger than Adam Feuerstein, which is saying something. So he's a surgeon, isn't that right?
Yes.
A surgeon turned public health type, something like that.
Yes, he's a general and endocrine surgeon at Brigham Women's
And he's
Hospital.
a professor at Harvard, so which that goes a little while towards your credibility, being a professor at Harvard, I feel like.
Yeah, to operate a giant, basically joint venture between three humongous corporations.
Well,
that's, you want someone who's used to working in a very, very small team to head that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he's going to operate this, and he does operations. So there you go. Surgical precision is what's needed to fix the healthcare system.
According to Jeff Bezos.
Okay.
Bezos?
I don't know.
So he has, let me just find this in the press release. Oh yeah, he has an expert's knowledge and a beginner's mind. Which,
it's sort of like that movie, Baby Geniuses.
Yeah, something like that. It's just, even though I know that Amazon is not in Silicon Valley, that's such a Silicon Valley thing to say. It's like, it sounds really meaningful, but it really means nothing.
Mm-hmm. And to be very clear, I mean, this guy might be a genius, and he might be a really great surgeon and an excellent author. And I don't think we're really trying to make a comment on that, because I'm sure many people, when they hear this, will come back to us and be like, hey, this guy's great. Did you read his books? The answer is no. We haven't read his books. But maybe if they gave us a little bit more detail about what this actual venture was, then we could draw a few more conclusions. But I have some theories.
Okay.
So my theory, and I might be wrong on this, is that they're going to do some sort of joint health provider type system, kind of like Zoom Care with less fraud. But it's based on absolutely nothing, except that it's just a half-baked idea that somebody might think might revolutionize healthcare.
Yeah, I don't really even know how seriously any of these companies are taking this. I mean, with this announcement, they've also announced that it's going to be based in Boston, where the CEO lives already. So he's so committed to this venture that he didn't want to change anything about his life, and they didn't really want to spring for relocation costs.
Maybe it's like a SPAC. It's just like they give this guy a company, and then he revolutionizes healthcare, right?
Right. And how many SPACs have actually worked? Does anybody ever?
Well, this is a different type of SPAC, more like a revolutionary SPAC. All right, so I guess in other news...
Well, no, we should still talk about this guy. Because there's more to talk about this guy.
Continue talking about this guy.
So like, if you actually look at what he's written, he wrote about checklists and the use of checklists as being good. So basically, if you want to...
So the name of one of his books was Checklist.
Yes. And basically, if you want to reduce errors, you make a checklist and you follow the checklist. A revolutionary idea.
Well, I think that is a pretty good idea for healthcare.
Well, yeah, but you kind of think like, aren't they already using such checklists, or is our healthcare system that screwed?
They probably should.
I mean, okay, so if you look at the New England Journal of Medicine article on his checklist, one of the earlier items is that the patient has verified his or her identity. It's like, I guess it's important
That's
to make
pretty
sure
important.
that, you're not operating on the wrong person.
Well, this way you give them those little bracelets.
So you have this checklist, and it's like, confirm that all team members have been introduced by name and role. So basically, you know who they are, and they know what they're doing. And
you wouldn't want the wrong doctor in there. That's even worse than having the wrong patient.
This
You get a folk doctor in there for heart surgery, SOL.
Totally. And, this really would have helped the Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase characters in Spies Like Us when they were trying to do the appendectomy in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
Because they really didn't know. Yeah. What was interesting, though, from the data, so they actually did look at kind of like before and after data on like statistics on death and everything like that.
Mm-hmm. Did checklists save lives?
Well, according to this, the answer is yes. Although for some reason, pneumonia actually went up, despite the fact that they do make sure that they are given prophylactic antibiotics.
It might be better for pneumonia just to ignore patients. To just like leave them alone in the hospital and don't go near them.
There's probably a good point there. What was funny when Max Nissen over at Bloomberg wrote a column on this announcement, and he mentioned how he's written a lot about how we need to fight kind of overdiagnosis and overtreatment. So I'm like, okay, so this guy's revolutionary idea for the healthcare system is to treat people less and pay for less things. And somehow that is completely different than every other health insurance company that we have here.
Yeah, it is. I mean, if the health insurance companies can manage to pay fewer people, the whole system would lose less money. What's good for the insurance company is good for everyone.
That would be a great motto for this new venture.
It's good for the company, it's good for everyone.
Yes.
Obey the company.
So we can become that giant corporate estate we've always wanted to be.
Yes. Our new corporate overlords. Maybe that's how they do it. Brain implants.
Brain implants. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, if you control everyone's every move with a brain implant, then healthcare costs will go down dramatically because overeating, brain implant. Don't eat so much. It's called preventative care, Max.
Yes. Well, why don't, instead of that, you can just like have, because, brain surgery tends to be expensive. You can just have some sort of shocker attached to your body and Google watches over you.
That's true. That's more like now technology. I'm thinking more like 2050 technology.
I think you're aggressive on 2050 technology.
Well, I've read enough like cyberpunk novels to know by 2050, this is all going to be in place.
Okay, yeah. But we're already supposed to have had replicants. And right now, one of our most advanced companies in this country, Tesla, is building cars in a tent.
But they are kind of like robot cars.
Kind of in a tent.
Tell me more about this. I don't know. Tesla is building them in a tent now? We're putting babies into tent cities, and we're also building cars in tent cities?
Yes, and actually, when I saw a picture on Twitter of like kind of this tent city, I actually thought it was a Tesla production plant at first.
Oh, okay.
It seems like half my Twitter feed now is either people being outraged by the refugee thing, and the other half are Tesla shorts. Mm-hmm. And there's very little actual healthcare. Anyway, yeah. So
well, I mean, we're here doing a healthcare podcast and not really talking about healthcare either, Max.
Well, we did.
We're part of the problem.
We talked about the joint venture.
The joint venture.
So we actually are doing our job here.
All right.
Well, but anyway, on Tesla, yeah, they're building these tents because I think they want to expand the factory so that they could produce more cars in a cheap way because they are unable to raise money right now. And one of the reasons they're unable to raise money, or the rumored reason they're unable to raise money, is because there might be an SEC enforcement action against them, and they don't want to actually disclose it.
Oh, goodness. It's really incumbent on the SEC to announce those things, don't you think? If the SEC doesn't say anything, should you? I don't think so.
Well, if it's an investigation, it's sort of like you'd be punishing people before they're shown to be guilty. But I would actually like the SEC to announce all of these things on a public website because
that would be great.
There's a lot of corporate fraud out there, and the SEC is definitely not doing its job.
That's one thing that working in healthcare, working in biotech will definitely beat into. There's a lot of corporate fraud.
Yes, I mean, tremendous amount. But if you guys haven't read the book Chicken Shit Club by Jesse Eisinger from the Wall Street Journal, I suggest you do. It really talks about how the regulators have completely moved away from going after corporate fraud just because it's so hard to prove, to prove that like a particular CEO actually knew there was fraud going on, actually getting that chain of evidence. And also they have like this other concern that, hey, if we, prove that this company has been fraudulent, all those people will be out of work and they're worried about the jobs. So they prefer going after insider trading cases.
So what's your favorite biotech corporate fraud?
Oh, over the years, my God, there have been so many.
It's like a fine wine. The corporate fraud in biotech is delicious.
I mean, right now, we have a couple, publicly ongoing. Like, there's always MiMedx, which is, a medical device company that does like wound healing stuff. That's going through a lot of issues. It's just amazing how all the different ways that you can commit corporate fraud as a medical device company. I mean,
specifically a medical device company?
Yeah.
Is it easier?
I think it's easier because as a biotech company, you commit fraud by just like only sharing a little bits of data. So I guess it's easier there.
That seems really easy.
But it's really hard
you
to
just have
commit.
to be a liar.
Yeah, but you can't really commit commercial fraud so much.
Yeah, you need it like for these like MiMedx, if they're committing corporate fraud, which we're not entirely sure right now, disclaimer, is probably stuffing channels, and that's a conspiracy right there. You know what I mean? Because you have to have your distributors or somebody on the other side that's willing to sort of accept all these units that you're trying to push.
Well, I mean, it's not. I think it goes a little bit beyond just stuffing channels because like everyone does that, like GM, Bristol Myers.
Everyone does that. Everyone stuffs channels.
No, but like I think it's a little bit more elaborate than that in terms of like some of the distributors. I think were
like employees.
Actual
it's
employees.
Making new channels to stuff.
Yes. So, or it could be like you weren't around when Armchair blew up. That's one of my favorite medical device frauds. They had a distributor called DiscoCare in Florida.
DiscoCare?
It was called DiscoCare. They were doing discs and they were caring for them, so they called it DiscoCare. And it was based in Florida, which is
always a good sign for any company.
Yeah, any Florida-based company.
Based in like southern Florida.
Yeah, I mean, they basically did an insurance mill scheme in Florida where these people were being treated for, like they would have an accident in like a factory or something. So it'd be like a workman's comp kind of case. And they would use one of Armchair's, I think it was called the spine wand, to help alleviate some of their pain. And they would charge significantly more than it was actually cost. And that was kind of manufacturing a lot of revenues for Armchair. And the funniest thing was, I remember at the time, I was short it, and I was reading a private investigator report, I think from one of the other shorts. They had subpoenaed one of the main practices that was involved with this. And so, of course, the woman at the front said, the doctor you're looking for isn't here. And then the PI just kind of waited outside, saw the doctor try to sneak out. Then the doctor ran back into the office, and 5 office workers left at the same time, went to their cars, started circling the parking lot, and then the doctor like ran into one of the cars and like drove off. Like it was like a big like shell game to try to evade the subpoena.
It's like when 2020 brings the cameras down on you, and they're like, no, don't look at me, don't look at me. That sounds like fun.
That was a fun short.
Do you want to start an activist short fund, Max?
Where's be an activist short?
Well, you get to call people out. It seems like fun.
Oh yeah, I mean it is fun. I mean I remember. I know activist longs call people out a lot, and they can because they're shareholders of the company, so they can't be. They can't really shut them up. Like they're still allowed to go to the shareholder meetings. Activist short. There's a lot of. I don't know. It's really hard not to get sued.
Some people think they're the devil, like every company that's committing fraud.
Most people think they're the devil, including longs. They think it's immoral to be short because you're betting on someone's downfall.
I don't think that's immoral. I think that's the market. And I'm really, really waiting on Northwest Bio. I just want, within my lifetime, I want to see Northwest Bio actually go down? I want to see those trial results.
Oh, they will go down. Oh, you'll never see those trial results, like, ever.
Oh, I'd love to.
You'll never. I mean, unless they release them in a bankruptcy proceedings or something.
Yeah,
I mean, the terms of their financings are just getting worse and worse. I don't remember the exact numbers, but they just raised money. It was on a note that's due in a year and a half. It's 8% annual interest. And then they had an over 10% discount on principal of the note. So if you kind of annualize that, you're probably talking about like around like 15%.
There's always a greater fool, it seems like, as they get more and more creative with their financing. So I'm sure a lot of people have made money based on the fact that they've been able to raise money 6 months, a year later.
I mean, eventually they're just going to be going to the mob if they haven't already.
That'd be fun too. That's how you go down, because the mob will burn down your restaurant. I learned that from Goodfellas.
Yes. I was actually thinking about that the other day because I saw a report on, just bring it back to Tesla. They have also I think, borrowed against just about every asset that they had. So it's sort of like, when the mob has squeezed the last bit of, money they can out of the restaurants, they just burn it down. Mm-hmm. So
how's Solar City doing?
They still have operations. I mean, it's not doing particularly well, and it would have gone bankrupt if Tesla hadn't bailed out himself and his cousins, who had started that company. I
know he had like his brother-in-law and his cousin, and his Aunt Gertrude, and his family members on these various boards too.
Well, there was like Tesla management members on the Solar City board, Solar City management members on the Tesla board. They had VCs in common, of course. My favorite, Tim Draper. Who was so in love with Elizabeth Holmes that he still thinks that it was just all a witch hunt. Although she is a witch, and they were hunting her, so technically he was probably right.
I think we're off the rails, Max.
No, he made that comment just the other day. He said it was a witch hunt. That he still believes that she's like innocent, and it was all just people who didn't like Elizabeth Holmes because she's crazy. A woman or something.
That's crazy. So yet another biotech corporate fraud. Microfluidics. I think that's what sold it. You know what I mean? A lot of these things you see like one word sort of pitch, like CRISPR. That's all you need to say.
Plastics.
That's where the money is. Now it's CRISPR. It was stem cells. That's a big one. And microfluidics was there. That was a fast one because she took advantage of the microfluidics craze that lasted about 15 minutes.
And she got to a $9 billion valuation.
Yes.
Well, in the private equity markets, which are literally insane. I mean, to call these things valuations, literally they're just sitting around a table deciding what to value the asset at so they can all mark it up in their books so that their books look better.
I want $9 billion, Max. How are we going to make that much money?
Well, I think it's much easier for us to manufacture $9 billion in biotech. You can do it on very little data.
It's true.
She actually has.
I'm just going to start 15 different revolutionary mouse trials, and I feel like I can knock those off around 10 grand a piece.
Just make sure you have like some CRISPR and some. Can you do like bronze finger technology, copper finger?
CRISPR's already done. Everyone knows now that it causes cancer and crap like that. CRISPR's done.
How about CRISPR?
CRISPR. Ooh, I like it. No, really. What is the next big thing, Max? What is the next big thing in biotech? So it's gene editing. I mean, we can talk about Sarepta here in a bit or whatever. I think that's here to stay. We want the next big thing.
Humanzs.
Humanzs?
It's going to be humanzs to be our workers, to be our slaves.
That's a biotech. So human-animal hybrids. Is this what you're saying? So not just gene editing, but like designer gene editing, like if I want horns,
that would look a little freaky, man.
Fish gills. I want fish gills because I want to be able to swim underwater forever.
Well, you want to be like that guy in that movie, The Smell of Water. What was that?
Lovely movie. Yeah, maybe that's it. Like really, like body modification, biohacker. Oh, the biohacker just killed himself, and gills might kill yourself. That might kill you. You might try to like drink some milk and it goes out through your gills and you die.
Well, it depends how the gills are like. I mean, is it replacing your normal lung function? Is it connected to how does it? I mean, is it just for cosmetic reasons?
Yeah, I mean, if you're into that, if you saw Shape of Water and you're like, it resonated with you.
Well, and also, I mean, I think in our environment today, if you want to consider yourself a fish, we should all be supportive of you being able to transition to a fish.
Yeah, and let's be honest, like people can transition between their genders now, and before that didn't always exist. People, I'm sure, before that were like, I wish I was a girl or a boy or whatever. And there are people out there that wish they had gills, and I really think it's a humanitarian mission to provide these people with gills or hooves or horns or whatever it is that you're interested in, right? Fur. Never cold again. Some of these have practical implications. Other ones of these they're just purely cosmetic. The horns don't really do anything. The next big thing is animal-human hybrids. But right now we're in the gene editing era, and it seems to be doing all right. Like, actually, I kind of like the new Sarepta data. I've been a consistent Sarepta skeptic.
Yes.
And I think both of us have been pretty consistently Sarepta skeptics. But it was kind of good.
Yeah, and I'm kind of kicking myself because I think it was a year ago or 2 years ago that they had already gotten approved. They had really sky high expectations, but eventually they came out with lowered guidance. And, I actually even made a note, like, I should think about buying Sarepta here because they now have achievable guidance. And so the stock should work because, they should be able to meet or beat it from now on, and just on the whole EPS revision strategy, it should work. But I never pulled the trigger because, the whole scientifically elegant placebo reference from the FDA approval documents kind of always held me back. But now it's up something like 500% since then. Yeah. And I'm like, I had it and I lost it.
And I would have just been happy to buy it last week, but yeah, it looks like these guys are actually getting some pretty good expression levels of, in this case, it's the microdystrophins, I think the really cool data.
Hey, maybe they'll actually be profitable on one drug, unlike BioMarin, who's unprofitable on 6 orphan drugs.
It's amazing.
I don't get that company. Do they understand
It costs a lot of money to innovate, Max. You got to spend money to make money. Sometimes you got to spend all your money to make money.
Henry Shamir was able to get profitable on one drug in an orphan indication.
Yes. I feel like anyone should be able to get profitable on one drug in an orphan indication.
I mean,
it's when you want to get approval for all the drugs in all the orphan indications, and you spend all your money doing that, and also buying versions of Sarepta that don't work, like BioMarin did.
Well, I'm sure they tried to buy Sarepta.
Maybe.
Didn't they try to buy Sarepta?
Bought their cousin. I can't remember.
No, I remember Prosensa.
Prosensa.
Yeah. But they must have been in discussions with everybody in the space at some point or other.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, whether public or non-public. But
so we should start a biotech, Max.
I've had that idea for a while. Pyramid Pharmaceuticals are, the lead product will be called Placebex. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure we can get some great data, especially in maybe pain.
Pain, yeah. That's good.
Especially, and our placebo is going to be red.
And we can measure it via like the 6-minute walk test or something like that. Perfect.
No, actually, I think we should do a diabetes drug with the 6-minute walk. And then also we'll have a hard, we can do some survival trials as well. So, we'll fund the trials and then, we'll never have to really release the data, or at least not for a couple decades.
So how do we get overall survival with a 6-minute walk test? You can do critical ischemia because those people die all the time.
No, we don't want people who die all the time. We want people who don't die, so we can continue the company forever and ever and ever. I mean, that's the Northwest Bio thing. Oh yeah, we've hit the necessary number of events. We're just waiting for every single person to die in the trial before we release it because we believe there'll be a tail.
Mm-hmm. It can be, what do they call like some of these natural supplements, like adaptogens or whatever? They make your body adapt and better.
I kind of want to have make a comment about this whole supplement thing. So it's insane. There's certain people in my life who I will not name so they don't get insulted, who are very much anti-medicine. Like one of them doesn't even like vaccines.
I've got a few of those in my life too.
But if you mention, hey, I just read an article about this herb or whatever that can do X, Y, or Z, they're like all over it. But, show them a clinical trial with 30,000 people in it, and they're like, it's all made up, man.
Well, I mean, it's all natural.
And nothing natural could be bad.
That's why my chemo of choice is Taxol.
Why would it be your chemo of choice?
Because it comes from a tree, Max.
But it's like horrible, and it's not soluble.
It's
and it's
all natural.
Yeah. I don't know. But you're a chemist, so shouldn't you like the synthetic stuff?
Shh. Don't tell anybody. I'm part of that vast conspiracy.
Of chemists?
Yeah, the scientific conspiracy trying to keep the natural products down.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's what all the pharma, all that stuff. I mean, all this stuff really does is just make you sicker. Right? So you need more drugs.
Oh,
Why do you think people need so many drugs now? And like 200 years ago, no one was taking any drugs.
Yeah, they were living till 40.
Yeah, they were fine.
Middle age was like 20.
Yeah, only if you were poor. They're falling off boats and stuff. Sailing across like the ocean, coming to America, falling off boats. That's the reason why everyone was dying. They didn't have autism.
But by the way, I mean, the whole autism thing, it's now referred to as the autism spectrum, which seems to incorporate almost everybody.
Mm-hmm. I actually like to talk about sort of these shifting diagnostic criteria or just what's sort of accepted in the world a lot when we talk about Asperger's syndrome, right? Because Asperger's syndrome used to be patients with autism that had real obsessive compulsions, right? Like real obsessive fascinations with certain things, certain topics, right? The classic example was, Asperger found these like kids, I think in the Viennese train yard, right? That were obsessed with the trains. That's a pretty common one. So occasionally you hear about some dude that will just like drive a bus and pretend to be a bus driver, like up in Harlem or something, just for a day for no reason. That's real Asperger's. That's the original definition, right? Just people that become absolutely obsessed, especially with like transit systems. It's really common. And there's a spectrum there. I won't debate it. But now it seems to be that everyone that's nerdy, that has interests that aren't sports, it can potentially be labeled Asperger's syndrome.
No, it's just they keep expanding the definition, especially, anything psychiatric. So like ADHD, before it was, if you're just like hyperactive, now there's like non-hyperactive components. It just means like you're impulsive. Oh, okay. So you're impulsive and you're a teenage boy.
I think it's one of those things too. You could definitely find a lot of people that have problems, and drugs fix a lot of problems. Amphetamine fixes pretty much all your problems.
Well, you think it fixes all your problems.
Mm-hmm. You get really skinny and you can concentrate. You're really productive. That's why it was originally popular, right? And my beef with Adderall and amphetamines is if we're prescribing this so kids can concentrate, why can't we prescribe it for anything else? You know what I mean? If that seems to be like that should be the low bar. That shouldn't be the entry point for ridiculously addictive medicine. So I'm always
speed.
Yes, for speed, right? So if we're going to give it to kids for that reason, why can't we give it to, say, somebody who's morbidly obese and is a diabetic? Maybe they should lose some weight because that'll probably save their life, right? Am I right here, or am I a horrible person? I'm never really sure.
So you just want to, you want to give amphetamines to fat people.
Not against their will, Max. You make it sound like I'm like force feeding fat people amphetamines. No, if they want it.
Well, they'd probably eat it.
No, they'll probably eat it.
But okay, well, to bring it to a more serious place, in terms of giving hard drugs as medicines. Mm-hmm. So Purdue Pharma has announced that they're laying off their entire sales force, or the rest of their sales force.
You don't need a sales force for opium products.
Yeah, you really
opiates,
don't. But I just don't understand.
That's the reason why everyone gets into drugs in the first place. They sell themselves.
You don't really have to promote OxyContin anymore, really, or ever. But one thing I've always had an issue is cannabis-based medicines for whatever are always like, that's really like risque to be developing a drug for whatever, that's cannabis-based. Like it's some sort of like hippie thing. Mm-hmm. So we've been prescribing synthetic forms of heroin for people who hurt a little bit for decades. Oh, you just had, a root canal? Have some OxyContin. You have fibromyalgia. All this other stuff didn't work. Have some OxyContin.
Well, there's GW.
Well, yeah, no GW, but that's
It's
doing
CBD.
CBD. But like,
yeah.
even Sativex, I don't think it ever got approved in the
Didn't get
U.S.
approved in the US, yeah.
It's really hard. I mean, you had dronabinol,
Yeah.
but like, there's all these things like how it's like controversial to have like these marijuana-based medicines out there when we've had heroin there for so long, and for things that there have been studies.
It's all natural.
I remember in JAMA, they published that if you just combine ibuprofen and Tylenol, it will be as effective as like a Vicodin, a Percocet, etc. So we didn't even need these things, and we could get by with what we have already.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we should push the envelope. Maybe Pyramid Biosciences should have a pipeline based on other psychoactive drugs like PCP.
Well, I don't think PCP is really my thing.
It's not really your thing?
No. But there is data behind psilocybin for depression. So
it's probably a ketamine type thing. I imagine that's got to have some sort of similar, ideology behind it, right? Because ketamine makes you lose your mind, and psilocybin, not so much lose your mind, but it gives you a different perspective, right?
It's kind of like a more. I think it takes a more Buddhist route. Which is like kind of you feel the oneness of the universe, so you don't feel as like alone. It kind of calms you down a bit like that. Versus ketamine, which I think was just some sort of, it was purely for dissociative.
I don't know. I think Timothy Leary put it at the top of his sort of hierarchy of drugs, if I remember correctly.
Timothy Leary. I remember when he was dying of cancer, he would actually list all of the drugs that he took that day. I mean, what were they going to do to him?
See, there you go.
What?
You could give mushrooms to people dying of cancer.
Yeah.
For a cancer pain indication.
Dude.
This might work. And I'm not a genius. I think this might actually work. I think I came up with something.
Cancer-related depression. We can make a new indication, and we can make a new scale. And then we can go with, agitation related to Alzheimer's, although I think other people are taking that one already. We'll just find all these like little bizarro kind of indications, and something's gonna stick. I mean, if that company Avenir was able to get cough syrup approved for pseudobulbar syndrome, which, if you guys don't know, is spontaneous laughing or crying, often related to MS. They got that approved, and then they got bought by another company, and they made up their own scale, and it was just dextromethorphan.
Jazz got GHB approved.
Yeah, the date rape drug for narcolepsy. I mean, that's pretty brilliant.
That is pretty brilliant. Somehow, like, you fall asleep all the time. I got something that'll fix that. Something that'll knock you straight out.
Yeah, and then they had their REMS program, keep competition away, because, like, I mean, you can patent your REMS program, but in that case, it was like, I believe it was a checklist. And, you had to put down your address so they would send it to you directly. That was like the REMS program. Was like a checklist for the physician, and then like you had to put in your address so they would send it to you directly, so you couldn't just like fake it and just give it to your friend or something.
People do GHB for fun, Max.
Yeah, they do. I remember.
Or they just use it like to rape people.
No, people do use it for fun. I mean, if people use Ambien for fun, why wouldn't they use GHB? And I remember when Jazz, I don't remember if they ever got approved for this, maybe not, but there was an advisory panel for GHB in fibromyalgia, and all the anti-drug people were coming out with like, they spoke at the panel, and they came out with statistics on its abuse and how at the time it was like increasingly abused. I mean, anything that makes you want to sleep, for some reason people want to abuse.
It's because they're depressed.
But if you're depressed, you're already
ironically, the best drug for depression is stuff that wakes you up, like amphetamines.
So our new company is going to market amphetamines
for depression.
We're going to have psilocybin
for depression.
And then can you make a new form of LSD that we can patent?
I got a formulation that can fix that. We're going to have buccal LSD. No one's patented that yet.
We get some sort of a liposomal formulation of that somehow.
Liposomal formulation. No, liposomal formulation of THC is butter.
Put it in butter?
Yeah, that's a liposomal.
Ooh, a butter popcorn one. So we can have a consumer division as well. I mean, have you seen the market caps of some of these consumer cannabis plays?
Yes, I have. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, one company has a freaking bubblegum can chew. And last time I checked, they had a $300 million valuation. There's hundreds of these cannabis companies out there, that have meaningful valuations. I don't know who keeps giving them money. I don't actually know who keeps giving any of these people money. Like the people who gave, who bought that 100-year Argentina debt. This is a country that has defaulted 8 times in the last 100 years. And so they issued 100-year debt that other people bought.
Somebody out there is making money off of these things. That's why you got to go, you got to be like a catfish. You got to be
A scum-sucking bottom feeder?
A bottom feeder, yes. That is the secret to making money on the stock market. Be a bottom feeder, find, something with a lot of spots on it that you can just polish off and then sell to somebody else.
Oh, so the Farmion model. Or actually, that was also the Axivant model.
The Axivant model, yes, this is
That's
right.
just a brilliant thing. I mean, take a drug that's already failed in Alzheimer's, develop it for Alzheimer's, and buy it for $5 million, and then get up to over $1 billion market cap. I mean, it's just beautiful.
I'll do this. Just somebody give me that first little bit of money, and I will make you a big $1 billion company. I promise. I know a lot of Alzheimer's drugs that have not gone anywhere because there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, and Pfizer alone probably has like 20 of them.
And then, there's like some drugs that just don't die. Like Alzion recently tried to go public with a lot of, major banks behind them. Like I remember Citibank was backing them, maybe like Jefferies. So they had a drug which failed about 10 years ago. And so now they were just developing it once again, with some mined data, and tried to go public again. And luckily they didn't, but, I'm sure they'll, if next boom, if they're still around, they'll be able to.
I feel like the best place for these failed drugs is this neuropsych place. Neuropsych and neurodegenerative disease and that sort of stuff. I can say this as a former neuroscientist, that neuroscience has attributed nothing to the understanding of human health and disease in the slightest, right? We found out a lot of interesting stuff, right? Like there's some dopamine, there's some glutamate, GABA, yada yada. But how that actually affects your mood or how any of these diseases work, no freaking clue, right? And so you don't even have to have that great mechanism of action. Like if you do a cancer drug, you have to have something that somebody can look at and be like, that makes plausible sense. That might actually kill some cells or something like that. You don't need that for neuropsych. You just have to say, it hits a receptor. It binds to something in the brain. You know what I mean? It binds to the metabotropic glutamate receptor type 1. It's a good one, right? It works great in mice, right? And you're off to the races.
Yeah, and as Sage has proved with some very short-term data, you can get a really high valuation. I mean, I don't really understand how anyone can draw any conclusions about a drug with it was 2 or 4 week efficacy in depression.
Mm-hmm.
If you actually want to have a depression drug, you really have to have like long-term safety data. Do people get tolerance? Are there weird symptoms? All this other stuff. Mm-hmm. And yet people are kind of assuming it's going to work forever.
That's awesome. GABA inhibitor. They're always GABA inhibitors, right?
So why don't we just, we can make it like a Flambian.
Flambian?
Flambian.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Flambian for fibromyalgia. Just take it at night. You'll feel better,
Yeah, this is a good idea.
That is literally actually how Sage doses. Sage doses their GABA targeting agent at night, and so you get less depressed, so if you get a good night's sleep, you feel a little bit better. So, hey, maybe we can we'll have some speed for depression, and then we'll have some downers for depression.
Yeah, you take the speed to wake up and the Flambian to go to sleep at night every day for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
you'll feel great. I promise.
Well, yes,
and please. There's something to actually be said for this. If taking a lot of otherwise illegal drugs keeps you from killing yourself, I'm all for it. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, but
I think a lot of people there are self-medicating already on some of these drugs. Let's let the doctor medicate them with some of these things. That's what I say.
I believe this was called the Rainbow Regimen or Rainbow Pill Regimen from the 60s for obesity. They would just give you kind of like a bunch of uppers and downers, and it would work for obesity. But then, if you've ever seen the movie Requiem for a Dream,
there's that whole psychosis problem with amphetamines. But I feel like if we're giving it to kids so they can do better in school, we can give it to people to save their freaking lives. That's just me. See, is there any other biotech news?
No, I think we covered all the major things.
All the major things. PD1s. PD1s, they're good.
Yeah, see, we've gone back in time to 2015 to talk about PD1s.
Oh, they're the next big thing. Right.
Jinx.
And CAR T's good too. All right, that sounds like it. Thanks for joining us, everyone. See you next time. Our theme music is by Hazar.